When the world goes quiet, some voices still remain. Not every soul finds peace when the clock strikes 12. There are stories hidden in the shadows, whispers drifting between the living and the forgotten. Some stories linger, some souls don't leave. Welcome to Stillness After Midnight, where every silence tells a story. If you're drawn to the mysteries that stir after dark, the voices that echo when the world sleeps, subscribe now and join us as we listen to the souls who still have something to say, because in the stillness, the truth finally speaks. They say every town has a ghost story. Some are fragile things, half-remembered tales passed along in hushed tones during sleepovers, or whispered between children daring each other to look into a darkened mirror. But some stories feel different, heavy, rooted not only in imagination, but in the soil, in the very bricks of a place. That's the kind of story I found when I first heard about the abandoned high school at the edge of the town. I was not from there. I had spent most of my life drifting, carrying a notebook and a pen like a traveler carries a compass. I had a fascination with forgotten places and the stories they kept. Legends, superstitions, fragments of memory that clung like cobwebs to the walls of ruined buildings. I wasn't looking for thrills the way some young ghost hunters do, nor for proof in the scientific sense. What I sought was atmosphere, the strange pulse of places that felt as though time had stopped, and the whispers that lingered long after the last bell had rung. The high school stood on the farthest end of a narrow road, where the asphalt cracked and weeds pushed through like stubborn fingers. A rusted gate barred the way, though it leaned so crookedly that a determined child could have slipped through without effort. Beyond it rose the building itself, a block of concrete scarred by weather, its windows gaping black like the hollow eyes of a skull. It had been closed for nearly 20 years. The town had grown smaller, the students fewer, until the school became too expensive to maintain. Some said it was because of tragedy, others insisted it was simply economics. But the building remained stubborn and silent, and the townsfolk never spoke of tearing it down. Instead, they spoke of avoiding it, and always they spoke of the girl. The rumor was precise. If you went into the girls' restroom on the third floor, and if you dared to open the last stall, you would see her. A girl in the old school uniform, pleated skirt, white blouse, standing there as though she had been waiting for you all along. But her face would not be her own. She had none, just a blank oval, smooth as porcelain. When I first heard it, I laughed, not out of disbelief exactly, but because of how familiar it sounded. In Japan, there are stories of Hanako-san, the ghost who lingers in school bathrooms. In China, there are tales of faceless spirits, Nopperabo, that wander in the night. Folklore often mirrors itself, reshaped by each culture, like water filling a vessel. So when I heard the town's version, I thought, this is just another echo. But something about the way people told it unsettled me. They did not laugh, did not treat it as a harmless dare. When the topic surfaced, voices dropped, eyes darted, and no one, not a single soul I spoke to, claimed to have gone to the restroom alone. The first time I stood before the gate, I remember the air was unusually still. No birds in the trees, no hum of insects, just silence, thick and watchful. I placed my hand on the cold iron and felt a shiver that was not entirely from the wind. I did not go in that day. Instead, I wandered the town, listening. An old woman at a tea house told me she had been a cleaner at the school. She remembered, though her voice trembled when she spoke. There was a girl, she said, quiet, always by herself. She wore her uniform neatly, even in summer when the heat made the others roll their sleeves. One day she didn't come home. They found her there. She did not finish the sentence. She did not have to. Another man, a shopkeeper, claimed his cousin had been a student. The teachers never spoke of it, but we knew. Someone had died, and after, no one wanted that restroom anymore. They locked it, but locks don't stop shadows. What unsettled me most was not the consistency of the details, but the silence that wrapped around them, the way every voice carried the weight of fear, like the fear itself had been passed down alongside the story. That night in the small inn where I stayed, I wrote by the light of a dim lamp. The paper smelled faintly of dust. The ink dragged slightly across the fibers. I tried to put into words the feeling of the place, the strange hollowness it carried. My window overlooked the road leading to the school, and as I wrote, I kept glancing toward it, expecting movement. None came. Only the shadows lengthened and the silence pressed closer. It was then I realized something that chilled me more than the story itself. I wanted to see her, not out of recklessness, but because there is something magnetic about a mystery. Once it touches you, it will not let go. The more I tried to push the thought aside, the stronger it became. What if the stall was opened and the girl really stood there? What if I could be the one to see her, not as legend, not as rumor, but with my own eyes? And yet a second thought lingered. What if she was not waiting to be seen? What if she was waiting for something else? I turned off the lamp, lay in bed, and stared at the ceiling. The silence of the town was not the silence of peace, but of expectation, as though everyone and everything held its breath, waiting for the next person foolish enough to step through the gate. I could feel that it would be me. It is strange, isn't it, how a single story can wrap itself around a place like ivy around stone. You might chip away at it, try to tear it down with reason or ridicule, but it clings stubbornly, refusing to die. The more people whisper it, the deeper its roots go. By the second evening of my stay in that quiet town, I began to realize the story of the faceless girl was more than a passing rumor. It was a shadow that stretched across generations. The town itself seemed to breathe with it. Every corner cafe, every dimly lit bar, every market stall I lingered by carried fragments of the same tale, spoken only when no children were near, and always with a caution in the voice. I had been introduced to someone they called the Keeper of Stories. That wasn't her real title, of course. Her name was Madame Eco, though no one addressed her so formally. She was a retired teacher, thin as bamboo, her hair pulled back into a silver knot. She had taught in the school, back when its halls were still filled with the chatter of students. Now she lived in a small wooden house near the shrine, surrounded by paper charms and faded photographs. When I knocked, she regarded me through a narrow slit in the door. Her eyes were sharp, the kind that seemed to weigh and measure a person in silence before granting entry. "You want to hear about her," she said. Not a question, an accusation. I admitted as much, though carefully. I told her I was writing, that I was interested in the town's history, its folklore. She let me in with a sigh that carried more resignation than hospitality. Her home smelled of incense and old paper. A kettle hissed on a low flame. We sat on the floor and she poured tea into chipped cups, her hands steady despite her age. "You must understand," she began, her voice quiet, "that stories like this are not told for amusement. They are warnings. They are reminders of what we cannot change." I asked her if she had known the girl. Her lips pressed into a thin line. Everyone knew her, though few spoke to her. She was quiet, always polite, but distant, as if she was listening to something we could not hear. "What was her name?" I pressed gently. "Names are dangerous," Madame Iko replied. "Names give shape. They call things back." The way she said it made the hairs on my arms rise. Still, after a long silence, she whispered it anyway. A soft syllable, almost lost beneath the crackle of the kettle. "I will not repeat it here." Even as I write these words, the sound of it lingers, and I feel the weight of her warning. Madame Iko told me of the day the girl disappeared. It was spring, cherry blossoms shedding their pale petals across the schoolyard. Classes had ended, and most students had gone home, but not her. She had been seen walking toward the restroom on the third floor. "She did not come out," Madame Iko said. Her eyes flicked toward the shadows in her room, as though expecting them to stir. At first, we thought she had simply gone home, but when her parents asked and the teachers searched, nothing. No trace, Not a bag, not a shoe, as though the restroom had swallowed her whole. I asked if they had found a body. No, she said. Her voice cracked, and for the first time I saw something raw in her face. Guilt, perhaps. Fear. That was the problem. When there is no body, there is no closure. Only questions, and questions breed stories. I leaned forward. So the story of the faceless girl, do you think it came from the students? From their imagination? Madame Aiko shook her head. Imagination does not make doors slam when no one is there. Imagination does not draw water up from dry pipes, staining the floor red. No, something was wrong in that restroom even before she vanished. She was only the last to go in. Her words sent a chill through me. There was a stillness in the room then, broken only by the faint tick of a clock. Do not go there, she said finally. Some doors should remain closed. I thanked her, though my gratitude felt hollow, as though I had taken something from her without giving anything in return. When I left her house, the evening light had already bled away, leaving the streets in muted blue shadow. The lanterns outside the shrine flickered in the wind. As I walked back to the inn, I replayed her words in my mind. Some doors should remain closed. But what happens when a door is left too long unopened? Does the darkness behind it sleep, or does it wait? That night I dreamed of corridors. Endless corridors lined with lockers, their metal doors dented and scarred. The fluorescent lights above flickered, humming with a broken rhythm. At the far end I saw the restroom door. It was half open. A single shadow moved inside, slender and still. When I woke, my skin was damp with sweat, though the air was cool. I tried to convince myself it was nothing more than my mind weaving together the stories I had heard. But even then, I knew better. Dreams are doors too. Sometimes they lead nowhere, and sometimes they lead exactly where you fear to go. The next morning I returned to Madame Aiko's house. I needed more, but when I knocked there was no answer. The door remained shut. The incense inside burned out. A neighbor told me she had left before dawn to visit relatives in another town. She had taken nothing with her but a small bag. I could not shake the feeling that she had left because of me, because she had told me too much. Standing in front of her empty house, I realized something had shifted. The story no longer belonged only to the town. It had found me. It had chosen me. And though I tried to resist, I knew I would go to the school. I had to open that door. You might think that old, abandoned schools are merely ruins, hollow shells where laughter once lived, now surrendered to silence. But that is not true. Silence is not empty. Silence is full. It presses against you. It breathes in rhythm with your steps. It waits for you to notice. The third morning of my stay, I made the walk toward the hill where the high school loomed. A narrow road wound upward, flanked by moss-darkened walls. Wild grass choked the path, bending under the weight of dew. No cars passed me, no voices carried on the air. Only crows sat along the wires above, watching with unblinking patience. I told myself I was merely observing, recording, studying. That is what I do. But deep down, I already knew. I wasn't coming as an observer. I was walking toward something that had been calling me ever since I arrived. The gates of the school stood rusted, one bent at an angle where years of storms had warped the metal. A faded sign clung stubbornly to the brick pillar, Kawamata High School. The paint had peeled, the wood beneath swollen with age. I stepped through the opening. The courtyard stretched wide and cracked, weeds splitting the asphalt. An old basketball hoop leaned sideways, its net long since rotted away. Cherry trees grew at the edge, their branches bare now, but I imagined the ground carpeted in pale blossoms once. It should have been beautiful. Instead, it felt like a graveyard for memories. The main building loomed ahead, 3 stories of concrete, its windows smeared with dust and streaked with rain. A faint smell of mold and iron reached me, the kind of scent that clings in the back of your throat. I paused, listening. Nothing. And yet, I cannot explain this properly. There was a vibration in the air, Not sound, but weight. The kind of weight that reminds you of being watched. Inside, the air was cool and damp. My footsteps echoed in the corridor, bouncing back too quickly, as if the walls leaned closer than they appeared. Rows of lockers lined the hallway, their paint flaking like dry skin. Some stood open, empty mouths gaping. A few still held scraps, a torn notebook page, a rusted thermos, a pair of shoes grown stiff with time. As I moved deeper, the silence thickened. I found myself whispering apologies to the air, as though disturbing something sacred. It was on the third floor that I felt it first, the pull. The stairwell creaked beneath my weight, though it should not have, being concrete. Each step up felt like wading deeper into water, resistance building around my body. And at the top, the hallway stretched long and pale. Every classroom door closed, except one. At the far end, the restroom door stood ajar. I knew it immediately. Before I even saw the faded sign above the frame, I knew. My pulse stuttered, yet my feet moved forward without asking permission. The floor here was different. Tiles instead of wood, broken in places, dark with stains I dared not name. The fluorescent light above flickered once, though I had seen no power supply. The restroom was small, lined with chipped sinks and mirrors spotted with decay. The smell was sharper here. Mildew, rust, something sour beneath. 3 stalls stood side by side, their doors hanging crooked. The first was open, empty. The second was closed, but when I pushed it, the door swung inward to reveal nothing but a shattered toilet bowl. And then, the third, the last stall. Its door was closed tight, the metal latch visible, as though locked from the inside. I froze. The air grew colder, my breath a faint mist. I remembered Madame Aiko's warning. Some doors should remain closed, and yet I had come here for this. With a trembling hand, I reached out. My fingertips brushed the metal. It was icy, far colder than the rest of the building. For a moment I considered turning back, leaving this place and never speaking of it again. But the silence behind the door was not passive, it was waiting. I slid the latch. The door resisted, then gave way with a long, aching creak. The stall was empty. For a heartbeat, relief washed over me, absurd and fleeting. But then I saw the mirror. A small mirror hung crooked above the stall, cracked through the center. And in it, I should not have looked. In it, I saw myself. Only my reflection was wrong. Where my face should have been, there was nothing. Smooth skin, featureless. No eyes, no mouth. Just a blank surface, pale and endless. I stumbled back, my shoulder striking the wall. The reflection remained. It did not mimic my movements. It stood perfectly still, faceless, staring, or what passed for staring, at me. Then the silence broke. A sound rose, faint at first, the scrape of something on the tiles, slow, deliberate. It came from the stall, from the space I had just seen empty. I turned back. The stall was no longer empty. A girl stood inside wearing a school uniform darkened with age. Her hair hung long, straight, and black, covering her shoulders. But her face, oh, her face, was like the reflection. Blank, no features, only skin stretched where a face should be. She tilted her head as though listening. And then, one step forward. I could not move. My body refused. My voice locked in my throat. She took another step, her shoes scraping against the tile. A whisper filled the air then, though her mouthless face did not move. You shouldn't have opened it. The lights flickered, the walls groaned. My vision blurred, and in that instant, I felt the weight of every story, every warning, pressing down on me. And then, blackness. When I woke, I was lying outside the school gates. My head ached, my palms scraped raw as if I had been dragged. The sun was already low and the air smelled of rain. No one was around. I staggered to my feet, staring at the silent building. The windows reflected nothing but gray sky. For a moment I doubted myself. Had it been a dream? A collapse of the nerves? But when I looked at my reflection in the cracked glass of the gate, my blood froze. For the briefest flicker of a second, too quick to be certain, my reflection had no face. When I returned to the inn that evening, the old wooden hallway seemed narrower than before. The lanterns swayed gently as if stirred by unseen breath, their dim glow painting the walls in trembling amber. I tried to convince myself it was fatigue, that fainting in that decrepit school had left my senses distorted. But even as I washed my face in cold water, I felt her presence. The girl without a face. Sleep refused me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the stall door swinging open, the blank reflection staring, waiting. At some point, perhaps past midnight, I heard something. A faint tapping. It came not from the inn's creaking roof or settling beams, but from inside the walls. Tap, tap, tap. Like fingernails searching for release. By morning, I knew I could not leave. Rational men would have boarded a train, escaped into the crowded neon of Tokyo, and forgotten this cursed town. But I am not a rational man. Curiosity, obsession, whatever name you grant it, it pulled me back to the hill. The second time entering Kawamata High felt different. The silence no longer surprised me. Instead, it seemed to recognize me. My steps across the cracked courtyard carried the weight of familiarity, as though I had joined an invisible audience already seated in the shadows. I did not wander aimlessly. I went straight for the third-floor restroom. The hallway seemed longer than before, the air pressing colder with each step. I half expected to find the stall sealed again, waiting. But when I arrived, the door of the last stall stood open. Inside, nothing. And yet, on the wall, scratched into the tiles, new marks had appeared. Thin, jagged lines etched by something sharp. 3 words in trembling English letters. I am here. I touched the grooves with my fingertips. The edges were fresh, still rough. That was when the sound began. At first it was faint, like wind dragging across broken glass. Then clearer, whispers, dozens of them overlapping, as though a classroom full of unseen mouths murmured lessons no one should hear. They came from the walls themselves, rising and falling like the tide. I pressed my ear to the cold tile. The whispers sharpened, and among them, one voice stood clearer, softer than the rest. You shouldn't have opened it. I staggered back, my pulse hammering. The corridor stretched around me, shadows trembling though no wind stirred. My instinct screamed to flee, but some darker compulsion rooted me. I raised my phone, switching on the recorder, telling myself this was research, documentation. But deep down, I think I wanted proof. Not for others, but for myself. Proof that I hadn't lost my mind. The whispers followed me as I moved through the building. In the library, dust-thick shelves leaned under forgotten weight, and the sound of pages turning echoed though no hands touched them. In the science lab, glass beakers quivered against the tables, as though disturbed by footsteps too light to see. And always, the feeling of eyes. Not one pair, many, dozens, watching from corners, from cracks in the ceiling, from the gaps between lockers. The air grew heavier until each breath tasted of rust. In one classroom, sunlight slanted weakly through grime-streaked windows. Desks sat in neat rows, but atop one rested something impossible. A notebook, fresh and unstained. I should not have touched it, but my hands reached anyway. On the first page in neat Japanese script was a name, Takako Ishida. My chest tightened. Madame Aiko had whispered of her, though she had not given details. The faceless girl had a name. I flipped the page. Beneath the neat handwriting, blotches spread. Ink drowned into black stains like blood-soaking paper. The letters warped, unreadable. And then, as I stared, the stains shifted. Shapes formed, a face, no, the absence of one smooth, blank skin. The whispers rose into laughter, brittle and broken. I dropped the notebook. The laughter cut off instantly. By the time I stumbled back to the courtyard, the sky had darkened with low clouds. I told myself I was finished, that I would never set foot inside again. But the building seemed to pulse behind me, alive, its windows like rows of watching eyes. At the gate, I turned for one last glance. That was when I saw them, not just one faceless girl. In the upper windows, shadows stood, rows of students in faded uniforms, each with that same blank expanse where faces should have been. Silent, unmoving, they filled the frames like mourners in a procession. I ran. Back at the inn, Madame Aiko waited in the common room. Her gaze was steady, her hands folded over a rosary of dark wooden beads. She did not ask where I had been. She already knew. "You saw them," she said. I nodded, unable to lie. "They are echoes," she continued softly. "Not souls at rest, but fragments. The walls remember every cry, every secret, every cruelty done inside that school. They gather there, and Takako, she is the loudest echo of all." Her voice lowered, almost to a whisper. "They say she was locked in that stall by her classmates, tormented, mocked, forgotten. She clawed at the door until her nails broke, until her voice cracked, until nothing remained but silence. And when they finally opened it, she had no face. It was as though the world erased her, punished her for existing." The beads clicked softly in her hand. "You opened her door. She follows you now." The fire crackled. Rain began to tap against the paper windows. And in that rhythm, I heard it again. Faint, patient. Tap, tap, tap. Inside the walls. Inside me. The storm that night seemed endless. Sheets of rain battered the inn's tiled roof, and every gust made the paper walls tremble. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, counting the seconds between the thunder. I wanted to believe the sound inside the walls was only water, only wind. But deep in the silence between strikes, I heard it again. Tap, tap, tap. And then, faint as a sigh against my ear, "I am here." Sleep never came. By dawn, my hands shook from exhaustion. Madame Aiko served breakfast, miso soup, pickled vegetables, but I barely touched it. She studied me without pity. "You dream with your eyes open," she said. "That is how they enter." I wanted to ask her how to stop them, but the words stuck, because some part of me didn't want them to stop. Some part of me wanted to know more, to peel away every layer until I saw what lay beneath that blank skin. That afternoon, the storm cleared, leaving the air sharp with the scent of wet earth. I wandered through the town, hoping the bustle of living people might ground me. But few souls lingered. The streets felt emptied of time itself, shutters drawn, as though the town had folded inward, retreating from what lingered on the hill. At a small antique shop, I paused. In the window stood a collection of lacquered boxes, porcelain dolls, and against the back wall, an oval mirror framed in cracked wood. Its glass was dim with age, rippling faintly like water disturbed. The shopkeeper, a man bent with years, shuffled to my side. His voice rasped like paper. "You are the foreigner who went to the school." It wasn't a question. I nodded. He pointed at the mirror. "Take it, no charge." I frowned. Why give it away? His eyes clouded with something between fear and pity. "Because it belongs to her." Before I could protest, he pressed the mirror into my hands and turned away, retreating into the shadows of his shop. I carried it back to the inn. The frame was heavier than expected, its wood damp as if it had absorbed years of rain. In my room, I set it against the wall. The glass reflected dimly, distorting my outline. My face appeared blurred, features smudged, and then, for a breath, it vanished. No eyes, no mouth, just smooth blankness staring back. I staggered, knocking over the lamp. Darkness flooded the room, broken only by the weak light from the hallway. When I turned back to the mirror, my face had returned. But beneath my reflection, faint and trembling, stood another figure. A girl in uniform, head tilted, faceless, her hand pressed against the inside of the glass. I fled to Madame Aiko, dragging the mirror with me. She inhaled sharply when she saw it. Fool, she whispered. Do you not understand? Mirrors are doors. They hold what should remain behind. That one, her voice cracked, was from the school, from the restroom. Her hands trembled as she touched the cracked frame. They say Takako's classmates forced her to look into it, forced her to watch as they erased her with their laughter, with their cruelty. Every insult, every lie, until her face was gone. The mirror kept it. It waits. I swallowed, throat dry. Why give it to me then? Because it chose you, she said simply. You opened her stall. Now she opens doors for you. That night I placed the mirror flat on the tatami floor, covering it with a sheet. But as I lay in bed, the fabric stirred, though no wind entered. I rose, trembling, and pulled the sheet aside. The glass rippled like water. And then, voices, hundreds of them, pouring from the mirror's surface, rising in overlapping cries. Some begged for help, some laughed in brittle, cruel tones, and one, soft and steady, called my name. I should not have known it. I never told anyone here. Yet she spoke it clearly, again and again. I leaned closer. The glass grew colder, mist beating across its surface like breath. And then, for the briefest moment, a face formed, eyes wide, mouth open in a scream that made no sound. Not blank, but raw, pleading. I reached out. The glass cracked beneath my fingers. The sound echoed through the inn like a gunshot. Madame Aiko burst into the room, rosary beads clutched in her hand. Enough! She shouted, voice carrying a force I hadn't heard before. She pressed the beads against the mirror. The cracks glowed faintly, a dull red pulse, then stilled. She turned on me, eyes fierce. You bring her closer each time you touch her world. Do you not understand? She does not want release. She wants replacement. Her words struck like thunder. Replacement. Was that why I had seen my own face blur? Why she called my name from within? The thought lodged deep, festering. I wanted to destroy the mirror, to smash it, scatter its shards into the river, bury it beneath stone. But every time I tried, something stopped me. My arms refused the swing, my grip loosened. It was as though the mirror had already hooked into me, guiding my will. And in truth, part of me wanted to keep it, to stare into that shifting glass and feel her near. The night ended with me sitting cross-legged before it, candlelight flickering across its surface. I whispered her name, Takako. The glass shivered, and for the first time I heard a reply. Not in whispers, not in screams, but in a voice soft as rain. Stay with me. The sound came first, soft, measured, deliberate. Footsteps. I knew them before I heard them. They had haunted the edges of my dreams ever since I touched the mirror. The steady rhythm of wooden soles against stone, slow as a funeral march. Now, as I sat alone in the inn, the mirror covered with cloth beside me, the sound moved down the empty corridor outside my door. Step, pause, step. I held my breath. The inn was silent otherwise. No guests, no voices, no rustle of servants. Just that sound drawing nearer, echoing too long, as if the corridor itself had stretched to make space for the one who walked it. I thought of opening the door, but something in the measured tread told me it would not matter whether the door was open or closed. Whatever approached already knew the way in. By morning, the sound had stopped. The corridor lay empty, lined with faded lanterns. Yet I could still smell the faint trace of incense, the kind burned in temples for the restless dead. Madame Aiko said nothing when she saw my pale face. She only pressed a talisman into my hand, a square of paper inked with black strokes. Place this above your door, she told me. It will slow her, though not forever. Her voice was weary. You keep the mirror. You invite her, and once invited, a spirit cannot be unmade, only bargained with or replaced. Her eyes lingered on me when she said the last word. I wondered if she already imagined my reflection dissolving into blankness. I spent that day walking the edge of the town. The villagers avoided my gaze, whispering as I passed. Once a child pointed at me, his mother yanking him away with a hiss. I caught only one phrase from their hurried voices. The chosen one. The phrase clung to me like ash. I didn't want to be chosen, but in the silence of the deserted streets, I realized I already was. By dusk, I found myself at the school gates again. I hadn't planned it. My feet simply carried me there, as if the rhythm of those phantom steps had set my pace. The gates groaned open with little effort. Inside, the air was thick, unmoving, heavy with mildew. The hallway stretched into gloom, windows coated in grime. My footsteps echoed, but beneath them, I swore I heard another set, fainter just behind. I carried only a lantern, its flame trembling. The corridor ahead forked into shadows. On one side, classrooms with doors ajar, desks overturned, chalk still scribbled with words that no longer made sense. On the other, a narrower passage, half swallowed by dark. It was there the sound grew clearer. Step, pause, step. I followed. The passage led to a side wing of the school, one I hadn't noticed before. At the far end stood a row of lockers, their metal doors rusted, many hanging open. On the floor before them lay a single pair of wooden Gata sandals, small, the kind worn by girls. They faced me. I bent down, fingers trembling, and touched them. The wood was damp, as though someone had just walked through rain. And then I heard it, behind me. Step, step, step. I turned sharply, lantern lifting. The corridor was empty, yet the sound moved closer, relentless. Each footfall vibrated through the floor, slow and heavy. My lantern flame guttered, as if pressed by invisible breath. I backed away until my shoulder struck the lockers. The metal rang out, hollow and mournful. And then I saw her. Not in full, but in fragments. A shadow at the edge of the lantern's glow. A sleeve of uniform. A swaying strand of hair. Never whole, always shifting, like something viewed through rippling water. She moved toward me without haste, and as she drew near, the mirror hidden back at the inn pulsed in my mind, as if it too drew breath. Takako, I whispered. The footsteps stopped. For a moment, silence. And then, in a voice like cloth tearing, mine! I fled. The corridor twisted beneath my feet, lengthening, stretching as if the school itself conspired to trap me. The lockers rattled, doors slamming open and shut in deafening rhythm. My lantern flickered wildly, throwing grotesque shadows across the walls. When I burst into the main hall again, I collapsed against the wall, chest heaving. The footsteps had stopped, but the echo of them throbbed in my bones. I didn't return to the inn immediately. Instead, I walked the grounds, circling the building until I reached the rear courtyard. There, half swallowed by weeds, stood an old stone well. The rope hung frayed, bucket rotted away, and carved into the stone lip, weathered but legible, were 3 words in Japanese. No face remains. That night I dreamed again. I walked the corridor, sandals tapping against stone, though I wore none. At the far end, a mirror stood tall, its frame broken, glass shimmering. In its surface, I saw not myself, but Takako. Her blank face turned toward me, and then slowly, features began to form. Eyes, nose, lips. Not hers. Mine. I woke drenched in sweat, the mirror in my room uncovered, though I swore I had left it veiled. My reflection stared back, blurred, trembling. And just beneath the surface, I heard the footsteps return. Step. Pause. Step. Not in the corridor now. Inside the glass. The inn felt smaller after that night. Each hallway seemed to press in, each paper screen too thin, each shadow too patient. I began to dread the silence between sounds, the empty spaces where whispers might gather. On the morning after the footsteps, Madame Aiko found me staring at the mirror again. I hadn't meant to uncover it, yet when I woke, the cloth had been folded neatly at its base, as though removed with care. "You must not look too long," she said. "The face is not always yours when you return." Her words stayed with me, because in the reflection I had just seen, my lips had moved though I had not spoken. I spent the day in restless wandering, the town's narrow streets, the crooked bridges spanning dried canals, the empty tea houses, all seemed abandoned to silence. Yet I felt observed, each corner thick with unseen eyes. The locals no longer avoided me. They simply pretended not to see me at all, as though I had already become part of the ghost story they whispered about. By dusk I returned to the school. It was as though invisible hands guided me there, turning my steps against my will. The gates yawned open again, like jaws expecting prey. The classrooms lay in ruin, paper doors slashed, chalkboards smeared, dust hung heavy in the air, thick enough to taste. And somewhere, deep in the bowels of the building, a sound began to rise. Not footsteps this time, whispers. They were faint at first, no louder than a breeze through reeds. But as I moved deeper into the building, the voices swelled, overlapping, layered like 100 conversations carried through thin walls. I pressed my ear against one sliding door. At once the whispers grew sharp, urgent, as though the speakers had noticed my listening. Then, clearer than the rest, a single word in Japanese, kawaii, fear. I stepped back, pulse hammering. The door rattled in its track. Something wanted to open it. I don't know why I slid it aside. Curiosity, perhaps. Or perhaps the same compulsion that had drawn me here night after night. The room beyond was empty. Rows of broken desks faced a chalkboard smeared with faded equations. A single lantern sat at the teacher's desk, unlit but fresh, as though placed there only hours before. I stepped inside. The whispers ceased at once. The silence was more suffocating than the voices. I touched the chalkboard with trembling fingers, and the dust clung to me like ash. Then suddenly, the desks scraped. Not all, only one. At the far corner, a chair shifted an inch, though no one sat in it. My lantern light caught something carved into the surface of that desk. A name. Takako. I staggered back, knocking over another chair. The room seemed to tilt, the air pressing in like water. And then the whispers returned, louder, encircling me, overlapping until they formed a chorus. Some voices wept. Others laughed. One hissed my name. I fled the room, sliding the door shut with shaking hands. The voices muffled but did not vanish. They lingered behind the wood, pressing close as though dozens of mouths waited just beyond. I dared not look back. Instead, I stumbled into the main corridor, the air colder than before. My lantern dimmed though its oil was full. At the end of the hall, another door waited. Unlike the others, this one was locked. Its paper surface had been reinforced with wooden slats, bound tightly with rope. And nailed to the center, half faded, was another talisman like the one Madame Aiko had given me. The whispers leaked from beneath the doorframe. I crouched before it, listening. At first the same chaotic murmur, but slowly one voice separated itself from the rest. It was soft, feminine. "Let me out." I froze. The voice grew more distinct, weaving itself into English now, broken but clear. "I am alone, so cold. Please." My throat tightened. It was the same tone, the same cadence I had heard in my dreams, when the blank-faced girl had begun to shape herself into me. I reached out, hand hovering over the talisman. My fingertips brushed the brittle paper. At once, the whispers surged into a scream. The wood shuddered. The rope strained. Something inside was pulling. I yanked my hand back. The voices cut off instantly. Silence fell, heavy as stone, as I stumbled from the building, the night air striking me like a blow. The school loomed behind me, its windows like blind eyes. I wanted to flee, to leave the town and never return. Yet even as I thought it, I felt the mirror's weight in my pack, pulling me back. The corridor of footsteps, the whispers behind the door. They weren't finished with me. Back at the inn, Madame Aiko was waiting. She saw the terror in my face and said nothing, only poured tea I could not drink. At last she spoke. You heard her. I nodded. She wants you to open the door. She wants you to trade places. Her gaze hardened. Do not mistake her plea for mercy. A spirit abandoned in rage will wear any mask to escape. If you open that door, it will not be she who leaves. It will be you who enters. Her words chilled me deeper than any ghostly whisper. Because even as she spoke, I realized how near I had been to peeling that talisman away. And part of me still wanted to. That night, sleep refused me. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard the whisper again. So cold. Please. At first it was outside the school door, then in the corridor of the inn, then at my bedside. When I finally dared to glance at the mirror, I saw my reflection's lips move, shaping the same words. Let me out. I covered the mirror with shaking hands, but I knew it was too late. Something had already followed me back. The mirror would not leave me in peace. No matter where I placed it, no matter how carefully I wrapped it in cloth, I could still feel it watching. Its surface seemed to breathe, to pulse faintly with some hidden rhythm, like the beating of a heart muffled underwater. I told myself to leave it outside, to bury it beneath the soil of the garden, or toss it into the stagnant canal behind the inn. But each time I tried, something stopped me, a heaviness in my chest, a whisper just at the edge of hearing. Not yet. Madame Aiko noticed my unrest. She always did. You brought the mirror from the school, didn't you? She asked one evening, her voice flat, more statement than question. I nodded. My throat was too dry to deny it. She sighed, long and weary. Objects remember. Glass most of all. It holds what gazes into it, faces, shadows, pieces of the soul. That one has been gazed into too long by things that should not have form. Her words twisted in me like a blade. Because I knew, without a doubt, that when I had looked into the mirror, it had gazed back. I tried to resist the pull of the school. For 2 days I stayed in the town, wandering the market streets, forcing myself to eat bowls of steaming noodles at the one stall that still remained open after dusk. But each night the whispers came back. Not from the inn's hallways now, but from the mirror itself. At first soft, like breath fogging the glass, then sharper, clearer. Sometimes I heard my own voice calling. Other times the voice of a girl I had never seen but somehow recognized. You left me there, alone. You owe me. Come back. By the third night, the words had become unbearable. I wrapped the mirror in its cloth and left the inn before dawn, lantern in hand, feet carrying me inevitably back to the school. The corridors greeted me with silence. Dust lay thick, untouched. But when I reached the classroom with the carved desk, the lantern waiting on the teacher's table was gone. In its place sat the mirror, unwrapped, upright, waiting. I should have fled then, but some part of me, some reckless, desperate part, stepped inside. The air was cold enough to sting my lungs. I lifted the lantern higher, its light trembling across broken desks. The mirror showed me standing alone, but behind my reflection, the room was filled with children. They sat at the desks, silent, their uniforms gray with dust. Their eyes were hollow, their mouths slack. Yet I recognized the weight of their gazes. They were not looking at me. They were looking at the girl behind me. I turned. No one. Only the cracked wall, the smudged chalkboard. When I faced the mirror again, she was there. A girl in a school uniform, her face a blur of shifting skin, like wet paper refusing to settle into shape. Where her features should have been, there was only a pale void. Yet she leaned closer in the reflection, as if pressing her faceless visage against the glass. And then, for a flicker, the blur settled. It was my face. I stumbled back, heart hammering against my ribs. The children in the reflection began to stir, their mouths moving in unison. Their whispers filled the room, though no sound left their lips. The girl, my reflection, but not, lifted her hand. Slowly, delicately, she pressed it against the inside of the mirror. The glass rippled. I dropped my lantern, flame sputtering. The room plunged into shadow lit only by the dull pulsing glow of the mirror itself. Her hand pushed further, the surface stretching like thin fabric. I could see her arm forming, pale and trembling, reaching through. The whispers rose to a fever pitch, echoing inside my skull. Let me out. I don't remember making the decision. Perhaps it wasn't mine at all. But I reached forward, pressing my hand against hers through the glass. The cold was unbearable. Not like ice, but like absence. The sensation of touching something that should not exist. The mirror shuddered. Cracks spiderwebbed across its surface. For a moment I thought it would shatter. Instead it swallowed me. I was standing in the same classroom, but not the same. The walls were whole, bright with sunlight, the desk clean and occupied by laughing students, a chalkboard covered in fresh lessons, and at the front of the room, the teacher smiled warmly, chalk in hand. It was a scene of life, frozen in some perfect memory. Yet I knew it was wrong, because not one of the children blinked. Their laughter never broke. Their mouths moved without sound. I turned to the mirror at the back of the room. My reflection stared back, face blank, skin pale as paper. Behind me stood the girl. Now she had features. My features, exactly, perfectly mirrored. She smiled. Thank you. The world cracked like broken glass. I fell backward, tumbling through darkness. The laughter warped into screams, the sunlight into red haze. The children's faces melted, eyes hollowing, jaws distorting. I hit the floor of the real classroom, lantern extinguished, chest heaving as though I had drowned. The mirror stood untouched. The cracks had vanished, but the girl was no longer inside. She stood in front of me now, flesh and bone, her face still my own. And I realized she was breathing. I was not. Her lips curled into a smile. At last. Then she turned, stepping calmly toward the door, leaving me crumpled and gasping like a shadow pinned to the floor. I tried to call out, to stop her, but no sound left my throat. My hands passed through the desks, through the wood, through everything. The mirror had taken me, and she had walked free. When I woke, if it could be called waking, the classroom was empty. The girl, the one who wore my face, was gone. The mirror stood silent, its surface dull once more, no longer pulsing with that sickly heartbeat. I staggered upright, but the movement felt wrong. My body was lighter, less solid. My footsteps made no sound. When I raised my hands, they were translucent, faintly shimmering like water catching moonlight. I was still in the school, but not in the way I had been before. A thought clawed at me. She had taken my place. The realization was suffocating. She walked free in my body, with my face, my voice, and I was trapped here, drifting like a forgotten shadow. I stumbled down the corridor, panic rising, calling her name though I didn't know it. My voice came out warped, like wind rushing through a hollow pipe. No answer. Only silence. But then, faintly, I heard footsteps echoing somewhere in the distance. Measured, confident, the click of shoes against old tiles. I chased the sound, though my legs felt like they moved through molasses. Every step stretched the hallway longer, pulling me away from the source of the sound. The walls seemed to tilt, leaning closer, until the school itself felt alive and watching. When I reached the stairwell, the footsteps stopped. At the bottom of the stairs stood a figure holding a lantern. Not the faceless girl. No. This was someone older. It was Madame Aiko. She lifted her lantern, the light spilling upward to meet me, and for the first time she looked directly at me. "I warned you," she said. Her voice was flat, tinged with sorrow. "But you brought it here anyway." "You can see me?" I croaked, my words breaking, echoing unnaturally. Her eyes narrowed. "Of course I can. This place belongs to the between, and so do I. But you," she tilted her head, "you are out of place." I wanted to beg her for help, to tell her what had happened, How the girl had taken my face and left me here. But she raised a hand to silence me. Listen, she said, the mirror is not just glass. It is a threshold. Every generation, someone tries to use it, to step across, to cheat the line between what is living and what is not. And each time, it demands a trade. Her lantern flickered, throwing shadows that seemed to crawl along the walls. You were the trade. The words pierced me. My stomach, or what passed for it now, lurched. No, I whispered. There has to be a way back. Her gaze was steady, unreadable. Perhaps, but to take back what was given, you must offer something greater. A chill swept through me, deeper than before. What do you mean? She stepped closer, her lantern held high. Her face was worn, her eyes lined with centuries of unspoken grief. You must give the mirror something it desires more than you, a life heavy with regret, a soul burdened enough to anchor it. Her words echoed like a sentence. I understood. To return, I would have to doom another. I recoiled, shaking my head violently. No, I can't. Her mouth twitched, almost a smile, but not. Most who say that eventually change their minds. Before I could respond, the lantern light dimmed. A breeze swept the hallway, carrying with it the faintest trace of laughter. Children's laughter. The walls quivered, the air thickened, and Madame Aiko stepped back, her face fading into shadow. You don't have long, she whispered. Choose before it chooses for you. And then she was gone. I ran, or floated, or stumbled, whatever form of movement I could manage now. Every corridor twisted back on itself. Windows looked out onto endless night, though I knew outside it was still day. My reflection appeared in every pane of glass, watching me with hollow eyes, a cruel mockery of what I used to be. I ended up back at the restroom. The door to the last stall was open. Inside, the faint outline of the girl lingered. She sat on the toilet, legs swinging idly, her face blurred again. But when she turned to look at me, her face shifted, and it was mine once more. You're still here, she said softly, almost kindly. Her voice was my voice, but calmer, more assured. You took my life, I spat, though the words came warped. She tilted her head, studying me like a curious child. I didn't take it. You gave it. You touched the glass. You wanted to see, to know. Her smile widened, unsettling in its gentleness. Now I carry the weight. You don't. I shook, furious. Give it back. Her laughter was hollow, echoing too long in the small restroom. Back? Why would I? Out there I can breathe. I can eat. I can walk in sunlight. Do you know how long I waited? Her eyes shimmered. My eyes, but filled with something ancient and broken. Decades, maybe longer. Do you think you were the first? The weight of her words sank in. She wasn't just some ghost child. She was every soul the mirror had ever taken, every story swallowed whole, and now she wore me. You'll never belong, I whispered, desperate. People will know. But she only smiled again. I only need to belong long enough. Then slowly she stood. Her form flickered, fading in and out, but still more solid than me. She walked past, brushing against my shoulder. Her touch was fire and ice at once, searing into my hollow shell. As she reached the door, she paused. If you want it back, she turned, her face shifting once more to that featureless blur. Then bring me another. One who will take your place, as you took mine. Her words lingered as she left. I collapsed to the restroom floor, the tiles icy against my knees. My mind raced. Could I really condemn someone else? But another thought struck me, cold and sharp. If she stayed in my body, she would live my life. She would speak to my friends, walk among strangers, and no one would know. And what would she do with it? The thought made me shudder. I drifted back to the classroom with the mirror. It stood silently now, dark and unremarkable. My reflection was gone, but when I reached out to touch its surface, it rippled once more. In its depths, I saw the girl, no, myself, walking through the town, smiling with my face, bowing politely to shopkeepers, her every movement natural and fluid. No one suspected, no one saw, and I knew with sick certainty that unless I acted, she would live my life forever. The mirror pulsed once, like a heartbeat, and I understood Madame Aiko's words. A trade must be made. It wasn't just about escape, it was about balance. The mirror would never simply release me. It demanded another in my place. The choice was mine. The days, or what passed for days in this endless twilight, bled together. I could not measure time anymore. There was no sunrise, no nightfall, only the echoing halls of the school, the flicker of memories that weren't mine, and the lingering laughter of children who had never left. Yet through the mirror, I could see her, living my life. She walked with my friends. She sat in cafes I had once loved, sipping tea and nodding at conversations. She laughed, though the sound was hollow, as if she had learned it by watching others. No one noticed. No one questioned. It was unbearable. I searched desperately for Madame Aiko. Perhaps she alone could explain how to reverse this exchange. But whenever I found the lantern's glow, it flickered and vanished before I could reach her. She was like smoke slipping through my fingers. So I turned to the mirror. It had brought me here. It had taken me. Perhaps it could give me back. Each time I pressed my hands against the glass, I felt the pulse, a deep thrum, like a drum buried under earth. The mirror wanted something. It was waiting, and I began to understand. I had seen it before, when she left me in the restroom, when she spoke through my face. The mirror fed on longing, on desperation. It wasn't just a doorway, it was a trap, woven from human weakness. If I wanted to return, I would need to lead another here, someone who would touch the glass willingly, who would press their desire against its surface, just as I had. The thought sickened me. I had never wished harm upon anyone, but as days passed, the hunger to be alive again gnawed at me like rats on bone. The school was endless, but the mirror's visions of my stolen life kept tormenting me, and slowly I began to wonder, was it truly so wrong? The first time the thought came, I pushed it away. But then I saw her, my double, sitting with my best friend, laughing too easily, her hand brushing theirs. That was not her place. It was mine. Rage surged through me, more solid than any form I could hold. For a brief moment, I thought I might tear through the mirror with sheer fury. Instead, the glass rippled, showing me another vision. Not of her, but of someone else. It was a boy, young, nervous, a new student who had wandered into the abandoned school on a dare. His flashlight beam wavered down the hallway, cutting through dust and shadow. I recognized the look on his face, curiosity mixed with fear. The same look I had worn when I first came here. The mirror was showing me an offering. I watched, torn between horror and hope, as the boy stepped into the old classroom. His breath came fast, visible in the cold air. And then his eyes fell on the mirror. He moved closer. "No," I whispered, though my voice was only a hiss of air. "Don't." But he didn't hear. His hand reached out. The glass shivered. And before I could stop myself, I reached from the other side, pressing my ghostly palm against his. The connection jolted me. His warmth surged into me like fire, and for a moment I felt flesh again, bones, heartbeat. The boy gasped, eyes wide with terror, trying to pull away, but the mirror clung to him, and to me. I could feel the choice before me, sharp and clear. If I let him go, the chance would vanish, but if I held on, the mirror would take him and give me back. My hands trembled. His muffled cries bled through the glass, his breath fogging against it. I whispered, "I'm sorry," and pressed harder. The mirror pulsed, stronger now, a violent rhythm shaking the walls. The boy's face blurred, his body trembling as if being pulled apart. Then, like water overflowing a cup, I was thrust forward. I gasped, Air filled my lungs. Real air. Cold, sharp, alive. I staggered back, collapsing to the floor of the classroom. My hands were solid, my skin was warm. My heartbeat thundered in my chest. I was back, but not alone. From the mirror came a scream, his scream, cut off too soon, and then silence. The surface dulled again, leaving only my reflection. For a moment, relief flooded me. I was alive. I was free. But as I stumbled to my feet, I saw it. In the reflection, my eyes were not the same. They shimmered faintly, as hers had. And deep inside me, I felt it. Something had followed. I fled the school, my legs shaking, every shadow whispering my name. The town looked unchanged, almost eerily normal. People walked by, chatting, shopping, laughing. None of them knew what I had done. None of them could see the faint shimmer that now clung to my skin like dew. But I knew. The boy's face haunted me, his desperate eyes, the sound of his hand pounding the glass as I pressed against him. He was still in there, and I had put him there. That night when I tried to sleep, the dreams came. I saw the boy wandering the endless corridors, calling for help. His voice cracked, weak, fading into the silence. And sometimes in those dreams, Madame Aiko appeared, her lantern flickering. "You made your choice," she whispered. "Now live with it." But it wasn't just guilt. In the dark, I heard footsteps outside my door. Slow, measured, familiar. And when I looked to the mirror in my bedroom, I saw not my own reflection, but his. I thought escaping the school would end the nightmare. I was wrong. The real horror began after I returned. At first, I tried to convince myself I was free. I walked through familiar streets, ate warm meals, heard the bustle of life all around me. But nothing tasted the same. Nothing sounded as it should. Every voice carried a faint echo, as if I were still listening from behind glass. And then there was the mirror. It started with small things. When I brushed my hair in the bathroom, the reflection would lag a second behind. My lips would stop moving, yet hers would continue. Sometimes she smiled when I did not, and sometimes the boy's face appeared instead. The first night it happened, I woke to find the mirror across my room glowing faintly. I tried to tell myself it was moonlight, but when I sat up, I saw him. His palm was pressed against the glass, his mouth opening in a soundless scream, his eyes wide, terrified, locked onto mine. I staggered from my bed, whispering, "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to." But then his features blurred, melting into hers, the faceless girl. She tilted her head, as if amused, and tapped the glass. I fled the room, heart pounding. Days passed, but the visions grew stronger. In shop windows and puddles, in the reflection of polished steel, I saw them, not always together. Sometimes the boy, staring with pleading eyes. Sometimes her, watching silently, lips curled into a smile that wasn't hers. It didn't matter if I looked away. Their presence lingered like smoke in the air, like a shadow just behind me. And always I felt the weight of what I had done. The town carried on as if nothing had happened. My friends greeted me. My family asked about school. But when I looked into their eyes, I wondered if they could sense the wrongness in me. Perhaps they saw the faint shimmer that followed me in the light. Perhaps they noticed the way my shadow sometimes lagged behind. But no one said a word. I stopped sleeping. Whenever I closed my eyes, I heard footsteps. Slow, dragging. Sometimes small feet, like the boys. Sometimes the sharp clack of wooden sandals. And when I opened my eyes, I saw them at the foot of my bed, watching, never moving closer, just waiting. Desperate, I searched for Madame Aiko again. The shrine had burned, but I combed through the outskirts of town, asking questions I knew sounded mad. Most people laughed me off. Some shook their heads. But an old vendor selling incense leaned closer when I mentioned her name. "You should not speak of her," he whispered. "She meddled with things no human should. Her lantern was said to light the way for spirits, but it burned her as well. They say she walks between worlds, never resting. If she has shown herself to you, it means you are already marked. Marked? I asked. He only pressed a stick of incense into my hand and said, "Pray." That night I lit the incense. Smoke curled into the dark, bitter and sweet all at once. I knelt before the mirror, hoping for mercy. "Please," I whispered, "let me go. Let him go. Take me back if you must. Just release us." The smoke drifted, coiling across the glass. For a moment the reflection blurred, and then she appeared. Not the boy this time, not even myself. Her, the faceless girl. But now, she had a mouth. It stretched open slowly, revealing teeth far too sharp, far too many. And in a voice that was almost my own, she whispered, "Trade." The word chilled me. Trade. It was always about bargains. That was the mirror's hunger. That was the reason no one ever escaped free. It demanded balance. I had taken the boy's place to return. Now she was offering another exchange. But what would it cost? I shook my head, tears stinging my eyes. "No, I won't. Not again." Her smile widened. The glass rippled like water, and I heard faint laughter. Children's voices echoing in empty halls. And then the boy's face appeared behind her. His eyes filled not with terror this time, but hatred. The days after blurred into torment. Objects shifted when I wasn't looking. My books opened to pages I had never read. My phone rang, but when I answered, all I heard was the sound of dripping water. At night, the dreams bled into waking life. I walked through my house, but the hallway stretched into endless corridors. Every door led back to the restroom stall. Every window looked out onto the abandoned schoolyard. And always I heard whispers. "You traded, you chose. Now it is your turn." I tried to warn my friends. I told them the school was dangerous, cursed. I begged them not to go. But curiosity is cruel. One evening I received a message. "We're going to the old school. Come with us." "Dare you?" I dropped my phone, panic clawing at my chest. I couldn't let them. If they touched that mirror, it would claim them. And worse, what if she was waiting? I ran through the night, the streets eerily silent. The town seemed frozen, as if holding its breath. When I reached the school, its gates groaned open on their own. Inside, the air was thick with dust, heavy with memory. My footsteps echoed too loudly, each sound swallowed by the walls. I called their names, but the building only answered with laughter. Hers, high, hollow, endless. And then I saw the glow, the mirror. It pulsed in the dark like a beating heart. And before it stood my friends, their hands reaching out. "No!" I screamed, racing forward. But the floor shifted beneath me. The corridor stretched, pulling me back as if the school itself resisted. The mirror flared brighter, and in its depths I saw not just my friends' reflections, but mine. Dozens of me, each distorted, each smiling with different mouths, different eyes. Some wept, some bared teeth, all pressed against the glass, begging to be released. The real horror struck me then. I was not the first, and I would not be the last. I had always thought the story would end at the school, but I was wrong again. The true ending, the final door, was waiting for me. When I saw my friends reaching toward the mirror, instinct overpowered fear. I forced myself forward, every step like wading through thick water. My throat burned from screaming, but the sound barely reached them. The mirror's glow swallowed everything. Its surface rippled, and I felt it pulling, not just my friends, but me. My body trembled as if invisible hands clawed at my skin. I lunged, grabbing one of them by the wrist. For a moment, the world froze. Her reflection, faceless once more, turned toward me. And then she spoke without a mouth. "You opened the door? You never closed it." The words sliced through me. She was right. I had bargained, taken the boy's place, but I had never sealed the curse. The door remained ajar, hungering for more. And now it wanted us all. The room collapsed into shadow. The walls bent inward like paper, and the ground beneath us melted into black water. My friends screamed as they were dragged toward the mirror, their reflections twisting with grotesque smiles. I held tighter, shouting, "Fight it! Don't look!" But how could they not? The mirror promised answers, secrets, power, everything the living crave, and everything the dead resent. Suddenly, a flicker of light cut through the dark. A lantern, faint but steady. I turned, and there she was, Madame Aiko. Or perhaps only her spirit. Her robes were tattered, her face half-shadowed, but the lantern in her hand glowed like a dying star. Her voice was barely more than a whisper. The last door must be shut from within. I staggered forward, desperate. How? Tell me. She shook her head slowly. A trade. Always a trade. One must remain to close it. Her lantern flames sputtered, casting long shadows that writhed like spirits. And then she was gone. The meaning struck me like ice. Someone had to stay. The mirror would never stop until it claimed balance. I looked at my friends, their terrified faces, their bodies trembling as the glass pulled them closer, and I knew what choice remained. The same choice the boy once made. With a scream that tore my chest, I shoved them away. They fell back onto solid ground, free from the mirror's grasp. And then I stepped forward. The glass swallowed me whole. Inside was not darkness, but endless halls. Corridors stretching beyond sight, lined with doors that led nowhere. Some were cracked open, and behind them I saw fragments of lives, faces I didn't recognize, moments frozen in time, children crying in classrooms, lovers whispering under cherry trees, a teacher bowing before an altar of incense, all trapped, all reflections, and in the center stood the faceless girl. She approached silently, her steps echoing too loudly. With each movement, her form shifted, sometimes the boy, sometimes me, sometimes a stranger I almost remembered. Finally, she stopped before me, her head tilted, waiting. I swallowed my fear and whispered, "I will take their place. Let them go." For the first time, she raised her hand, not to touch me, but to her own face. Slowly, she peeled it away like paper, and beneath was mine. I stumbled back, horror freezing my blood. Her smile, my smile, spread wide. "You were always me," she whispered in my own voice. "Every reflection is a door, and every door leads back here." The walls shook, and the corridors rippled. The doors began to slam shut one by one, the echoes like thunder. She extended her hand. "Close it with me, or let it remain open forever." I hesitated. The boy's face flashed in my mind, his terrified eyes begging for release. Maybe this was how the curse survived. Through choices, through trades. Someone always left behind. But if I refused, the door would remain open, devouring more and more lives. I clenched my fists, heart pounding. "I'll do it," I whispered. Her smile widened, my smile, and together we pressed our palms against the final door. It burned like fire. The glass cracked beneath our touch, splintering into 1,000 shards. Light poured through, blinding, searing. I screamed as the world shattered, as the mirror finally broke. And then, silence. When I opened my eyes, I was outside the school. The night air was cool against my skin, the stars sharp and clear above. My friends were beside me, shaken but alive. The mirror was gone. Only broken shards lay scattered, reflecting nothing. For a moment, I thought it was over. But then, in the faint gleam of moonlight, I caught sight of my reflection in one of the shards, and she smiled back at me. I told no one what happened that night. The school was demolished months later, leaving only empty land where it once stood. People said it was for safety, but I knew the truth. They wanted to erase it, to bury its memory. Yet even now I avoid mirrors, because sometimes when I'm too tired to fight, I see her, myself, waiting. And I wonder, did I really close the last door, or did I only step through it? Thanks for watching the whole video. Please give me a like and subscribe to the channel to watch more interesting stories.